I had never tried it in my lifetime until.
But what kind of advice do you have for people who say, wait, we might be, tightening our belts and looking at our budget?
A recession may be 60, 70% imminent. But how do we overcome that?
Mm-hmm. Well, hi, Alex. How are you?
Very good. How are you, Irna?
I'm really good. I'm so excited to see you. And I'm just going to pin us properly here. I'm very, very excited to see you. And the clients that I've been working with recently have lots of questions for an expert like you. So I'm hoping we can go over some of them today.
Absolutely.
When we first started talking, me here in little Austin, Texas, and you in big New York, right here, there at the top of the world, you mentioned once that in your career, 20 some years, initially you did, Fortune 100 marketing things, and you put 1,000,000 miles on an airplane, and you were in all the major cities, and had a very global perspective about product marketing, what marketing initiatives needed to be done. As you've gone out on your own, for the last several years, you have, big global companies, but you also have smaller companies. And so you're kind of working both ends of the spectrum. And as we were talking now, and I said, I hope we could talk about sort of the changing dynamic of the economic landscape. You said, we're all on the same flight and experiencing turbulence. So I thought that was so great. But, I think of the connective tissue of how clients purchase something, whether they're purchasing a service or purchasing a physical product. There's this branding, and there's pricing, and there's delivery on the shelf or to a website. And that connective tissue all includes marketing. Right. And so even in challenging times, you can't just eliminate marketing unless you just want to shut your doors and close down your business. You can reallocate advertising dollars. You can double down on the pricing end of brands that are selling the best right now. But what kind of advice do you have for people who say, wait, we might be, tightening our belts and looking at our budget, but we have to stay in business and meet payroll, and that means selling stuff? What kind of advice do you have given our turbulence right now?
That's an excellent point and question. I would tell you, look, I've been a marketer almost 30 years. I started very young. I worked in the food industry, in the banking industry, in consumer packaged goods, in pharma, and then in e-commerce. So I came from not even Fortune 100, but Fortune 50 companies. And then I decided to go to private equity. Then I went on my own, and I launched Savvy Marketers 13 and a half years ago. It's unbelievable how time flies.
Wow.
And one thing that I feel really blessed is having the experience of working in different industries throughout my business trajectory helped me open my eyes, because I always say that marketing is the brain and the heart of companies. Why the brain? Because we're the ones building strategy, right? So defining where we want to play, who are we going after in terms of who's our target consumer, our target audience, looking at the competitive landscape, and then building, growing, and driving awareness, driving trial and conversion that hopefully will lead to loyalty, right? That's what we always strive for as marketers. But I say the brain because strategy is crucial. You have to be very strategic, understanding where you want to go and how do you get there. And then the heart, I always say it's such a vital organ. It's the first organ that a human being, when it's, coming out of an embryo, it develops, right? The first thing is your heart, right? And I always say that marketers have that sense of heart, because that's how you build relevance. You become beloved by consumers. Now, you brought a very good point, right? And as I was listening to you, I was thinking back, okay, what have been some of the major things that we experience as marketers and in businesses this past 30 years? So I'm going to say a couple.
Yes.
The first one, Y2K. Probably a lot of people don't remember what Y2K was.
The world was coming to an end.
But the world, what we thought of from an information standpoint, from a financial standpoint, we thought, hey, changing that digit from, one being first to two, we thought that it was going to be catastrophic. So every single company put dedicated efforts into Y2K.
Mhm.
And what happened afterwards? Because companies didn't lose sight of what was important, they
Mhm.
kept their business going, but they had a proactive action in terms of database, in terms of information, so their systems wouldn't change. That
Mhm.
helped the financial industry, that helped, transactions, anything from taking your money out of an ATM, right?
Mhm.
Basic things like that. And nothing bad happened. Why? Because people prepared.
Yes.
But there are things in life that we don't get to be prepared,
Mhm.
right? 9/11 was something that
Mhm.
nobody thought that it could even be possible, and that
Mhm.
planes would be used as the weapon,
Mhm.
right? As a weapon of mass destruction that brought so many loss of lives,
Mhm.
right? The biggest tragedy that we all watch through televisions,
And it
right?
caused a global shock. I mean, I
It-
realize it happened, in North America here, but it caused a global shock, like
Everywhere,
a whole new
everywhere.
way, a whole new risk matrix to think about
Absolutely.
for countries and for big cities.
And the interesting thing was that at that point, the only thing that changed from a marketing standpoint was the fact that brands stopped advertising out of respect,
Mhm.
right? So that was a moment where companies said, hey, this is a moment where it has to be of reflection.
Mhm.
It's a moment of loss, but
Mhm.
we're resilient.
Mhm.
So there was a moment of pause for the right reasons. But then, because we're resilient as a nation and as human beings,
Mhm.
we were able to overcome that. And of course, there were a lot of things from a security standpoint, the way we travel changed forever,
Yes.
right? That you
Yes.
have to take your shoes off, take your laptop, you cannot carry any
You get
liquids.
this much shampoo. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So all of those things happen. But then after that, 2008, we had a global recession, right? So
Mhm.
what happened then? Companies were, oh my gosh, the stock market is being impacted. We need to kind of reshift gears and reprioritize, but
Mhm.
still people kept investing, people didn't lose focus. And that's why this is so important, because we were able to overcome that, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there was a housing crisis, there was a banking crisis, but as human beings, as Americans, no
Mhm.
matter where we were able to overcome that. Then what other things have happened? Well,
Mhm.
let's think about the moment where we in 2020 starting a new decade,
Oh, yeah.
everybody excited for the new decade. What happened in the month of March? It became imminent that something called COVID-19
Mhm.
was no longer an epidemic,
Worldwide
was not
impact again.
siloing Italy or in
Mhm.
other parts of Europe, beyond Asia, beyond China, but
Mhm.
it became a global pandemic and over 30 million people died,
Mhm.
right? So those are facts. And of course, we had to rewire ourselves in terms of how do we approach our jobs? How do we keep business going? How do we stay in business? How do we keep supporting our businesses, brands? And building resilience. So I just share with you in 3 decades, 4 key things that happen, but that show resilience. Now, at the same time, thinking about Y2K, right before that in 1992, something incredible came out, World Wide Web.
Yeah.
Right, the World Wide Web, the internet as we know it, although it was created since the 1940s, but
Mhm.
it was not public, right? It became public thanks to Al Gore, nothing related to politics, but
Mhm.
he was the one who envisioned the World Wide Web.
And this whole new world of commerce that we are in now.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So the World Wide Web, then we had MySpace, then we had Facebook. And look at where we are. Then this book company of online books became the largest retailer in the world, Amazon, right? And now, we have TikTok, we have so much social commerce. And not only that, that's why I say, like, even in turbulent times, resilience and innovation rule. because even in turbulent times, AI came to the table. Of course, AI has existed at machine learning for at least over 20 years.
Mhm.
But generative AI, the way that we know it, came out 2 years ago, November of 2022,
Right.
with ChatGPT, with
ChatGPT.
OpenAI, the
Mhm.
largest investment of any startup in the history of any startup,
Mhm.
right? They got over 10 billion
Mhm.
investment fueled by Microsoft. And
Mhm.
then everybody has followed, everybody's doing something with AI and so forth. So
Mhm.
why do I bring this different anecdotes? Because what it shows is a resilience to not lose focus, continue to build momentum, focus on our objectives, and address the needs and bring value to others.
Mhm.
And value is not about being cheap.
Mhm.
Value is bringing something, an offering that is an unmet need in a
Mhm.
relevant and meaningful way to the customer
Mhm.
or to the end user.
Mhm.
So ultimately, when we think about that, and then we think about all the technological advancements that we have seen
Mhm.
being led by the United States that are being propelled across the world,
Mhm.
that shows us as human beings, we are resilient. As
Mhm.
human beings, we have to continue to not lose focus of what's important and what's relevant. So why do I share this with your audience and your listeners? First and foremost, because yes, as we were discussing earlier, we're all on the same flight right now, right? We
Mhm.
are on board a flight
Mhm.
taking us to that destination,
Mhm.
whatever that may be, right?
Mhm.
I know that we're all going to different places,
Mhm.
but ultimately there's winds of change. So when a control tower or when a pilot knows that there's some changes in the air or
Mhm.
turbulence, they try to mitigate that to make
Yes.
it as minimal as possible. But ultimately, what we have been experiencing for the past 4 months, right?
Mhm.
There was inflation last year,
Mhm.
driven, of course, because of the pandemic, after 4 years of the pandemic.
Mhm.
Uh, but then with rising costs,
Mhm.
tariffs, and
Mhm.
all of these other things that are impacting the market, what
Mhm.
I'm seeing from many companies is a recession, maybe 60, 70% imminent. But how do we overcome that?
Mhm.
And what I say to people is look, we're in this together. Just like we were in 2020 when we were all, on lockdown,
Mhm.
struggling, watching the news, trying to make ends meet in the best
Figure
possible.
out what this new world is going to be.
Exactly. But we have to be mindful. Look, there's big changes happening.
Mhm.
One is inflation, pricing because of tariffs. And whoever says, regardless of party, this is not politics, this is economics 101.
Mhm.
Tariffs impact the end consumer,
Mhm.
no matter what. It
Mhm.
doesn't impact a country, it
Mhm.
impacts the end consumer.
Mhm.
So ultimately, what retailers are going to do, the Targets, the Walmarts, is try to mitigate that as much as possible and
Mhm.
try to push corporations to manage those costs.
Yes.
At the same time, those corporations need to manage their suppliers. So there is a domino effect, but
Yes.
ultimately the consumer pays. Will the consumer pay it all entirely? Not necessarily. But
Mhm.
what I say to people is look, I know that many companies are trying to reduce SG&A costs,
Yes.
meaning I still need to make payroll, I still need to pay my operational expenses, I
Mhm.
still need to pay rent, right? That happens to any big company,
Any.
middle America company,
Mhm.
or a very small company,
Yes.
including mine.
Yes.
So ultimately is okay, you need to understand what are the implications for your business, but then instead of cutting either staff or cutting investments, this is actually a good time to invest in brands and to support your marketing efforts. Why? Because consumers are not just looking for value from a lower price standpoint, they're looking for relevance, a
Mhm.
brand, a product that speaks, that connects with them, that resonates with them,
Mhm.
right? If not, people wouldn't be buying iPhones and paying over $1,000 for an iPhone.
Right.
So ultimately, these are things that are important. What's the value proposition? What
Mhm.
is it that I'm giving the consumer? And guess what? If you don't invest, if you don't communicate that, They're
Mhm.
not going to know. So if they're not going to know, why would they bother and pay for it,
Right.
right? So that's why we need to really convey what is our point of difference. That's the
Mhm.
one thing that I tell our clients.
Mhm.
And then secondly, I would say you need to stay relevant to what your competitors are doing in the marketplace so you are ahead of the curve.
Mhm.
But then the third thing that I would say is, and it's the second impact, that it's in that turbulent times that we're living. Everybody's excited about AI. And look, I've been in AI from a neuroscience, from an innovative market research standpoint since
Mhm.
2017.
Mhm.
So I love AI. I love AI, ethical AI,
Yes.
responsible AI.
Yes.
So there's a lot of implications that generative AI are going to bring.
Mhm.
Now we see that you know, companies like Elon Musk, when he went to Saudi Arabia,
Mhm.
he mentioned in Saudi Arabia the robots, right? The AI robots. So
Mhm.
these things are coming.
Yes.
But how is that going to impact us? Well, guess what? AI is going to change everything.
Yes.
AI is going to change the way we live, the way we work, the way we consume,
Mhm.
and that's going to impact our jobs.
Mhm.
So, like Bill Gates said, AI is going to change everything, but how do we stay resilient
Mhm.
and make our jobs
Mhm.
relevant?
Mhm.
Let's take irrelevant out of the table. So, how do we bring value? And there are two very important things that AI will never do:
Mhm.
have the human empathy
Mhm.
and have the human creativity,
Yes.
right? So, keeping those things in mind, I say to people, no matter if you're in sales, no matter if you're in marketing, no matter if you are a mom and pops
Mhm.
or a big corporation, make sure that you're really leveraging your talent and preparing your talent for the future. But
Mhm.
very importantly, as entrepreneurs, we need to elevate our skill sets and competencies for what's coming,
Yes.
because it is coming. It's here. And it's here and it's going to change everything. And many people say, oh, but jobs are not going to be impacted. Everything is going to be
They
impacted.
already
All
are being
jobs are going to
impacted.
be impacted.
Right.
So we have to be mindful of that. But instead of being scared, let's be prepared.
Mhm.
Just like in Y2K, we were prepared, right?
Mhm.
There's certain things in life that we couldn't prepare because we didn't know well
Mhm.
that they would ever happen. That's why I was saying 9/11. Nobody, that was unthinkable, unimaginable,
Mhm.
right? What happened with the pandemic? Unthinkable, unimaginable, because we knew the Spanish flu, but that was 100 years before.
Yes,
It's like the
exactly. We
world
never
was
thought. Mhm.
right. The world was entirely different.
Mhm.
So ultimately, what I say to people, look, as we're navigating turbulence, don't lose the big picture.
Mhm.
Prepare yourself and set up your game plan in a way that you know how to stay relevant with your business, with your products, with your services,
Mhm.
and leverage generative AI in the best possible way. Leverage technology in the best possible way.
Mhm.
Leverage social media in the best possible way.
Mhm.
In this era, there's all of those tools are bridges to opportunities, not they're not blocking.
Mhm.
But if we become scared of them
Mhm.
and we don't face what's coming,
Mhm.
then we're not going to be prepared for the future that it's going to be in front of us. So that's why I was kind of trying to share that example
Mhm.
of, how things have changed this last 30 years,
Mhm.
right? And the future is bright. That's what I tell people. Yes, I know it could get a little bumpy, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, we're going to get to the destination that we're looking for. We just have to stay focused, stay
Mhm.
resilient,
Mhm.
do everything in our power to do things right, no matter what, especially when no one is watching, being ethical, having a clear sense of purpose and
Mhm.
a clear point of difference,
Mhm.
and we will succeed.
I'm so pleased you talk about how your clients say, "Oh, I have a call with Alex. I'll be getting a candid conversation." Because we're going to say, "Look, what's working." Where do we need to be investing? And I think the Y2K is such a good example because we can see some of these changes coming. Okay, we couldn't see 300% tariffs that were true for 11 days, and then there were 100, and then we're threatening something else. I mean, we couldn't have necessarily seen that. And that is turbulence. It's going to settle itself down in the coming months. So we don't have to make giant wholesale decisions in response to that. But AI, we are going to have to make Y2K type decisions. And I think if you have a veteran marketer like you who can have a candid conversation and say, where is your revenue coming from now? What are you selling that is selling? At what price point and to whom? Because the days of being a sloppy marketer are probably over. The days of just throwing some ad dollars against the wall and calling it a day are probably over. They're going to have to double down and really bring their thinking to their marketing game, because you can't just stop marketing. You still have to sell what you sell. People want to
Exactly.
buy it. You mentioned before when we spoke that if somebody really needs a car, they go buy a car. Maybe it's not the best-selling year for cars, but they're not going to sell zero cars. And so you have to compete in a market that looks like that. If someone needs to buy a handbag or a wallet or a house or whatever it is, there will be people who have a need to buy what you're selling. Those competitors that stop marketing, well, they've just opened the lane for you, haven't they? If you're paying attention and have a candid conversation with you, savvy-marketers.com, to say, here's what I'm facing and here's what was working, but it's not working anymore. Tell me how you sit down with a new client and say, okay, here's where we are. You make recommendations, share a little bit about how you work with clients.
Absolutely. I'll be delighted to. So, the first thing is really looking at their business, right? Having an open conversation, open dialogue to understand where they are, what are the challenges they're facing, because that's the only way that we can help overcome them.
Mhm,
The other thing that I look at that for me is very vital is not only looking at results, market share data, sales projections, all of these things, but very importantly, what kind of learning have you had in the market and with consumers?
okay.
Because for me, research and consumer centricity are vital.
Mhm,
Gathering insights, understanding what your consumers want. Are they happy? Are they satisfied with your products or your services?
mhm,
Are they buying you? How long have they been buying you? Are there any improvements, any pain points? And
mhm,
how do we close that gap? How
mhm,
do we really bring satisfaction?
mhm,
Or if you have a wide audience and you're a market leader, you know, how do you continue to increase drive awareness,
mhm,
and continue to develop and expand or grow the category?
mhm,
Or if you are if your sales are stagnant and your share is flat,
mhm,
right, meaning share, not a
mhm.
physical share like the
Right.
one I'm sitting, but
The
your
market
market
share.
share.
Mhm.
Just seeing, okay, who's winning in the category?
Yeah.
Is it private label? Is it store brands? Is it
Mhm,
another competitor?
mhm,
Who's that competitor? Have we tapped into that? Have we seen their pricing? Have we seen their portfolio? Have we seen their distribution? Have we seen their advertisement or
mhm,
their level of investment? Right?
mhm,
Because maybe it's more about stepping up our game, right? And rolling our sleeves and
mhm,
putting more funds and investing in the business,
mhm,
right? Or they found an unmet need that nobody was talking about it and they tap into a great opportunity.
mhm,
So the beauty of marketing, and this is what I tell all of our clients, is when you have challenges, that's when it gets really interesting,
mhm,
because it gets you out of your comfort zone. And
mhm,
getting out of your comfort zone, it's actually a good thing, because when the business is growing, okay, you just keep doing what you're doing.
mhm,
But does that make you become better?
mhm,
In many cases, it doesn't,
mhm,
right? And you just stay the course. And then when
mhm,
competition or something happens,
mhm.
then you can't react.
You can be
Our
caught off
ability to-
guard because you were just asleep at the wheel. You were in a glide path things were working, and you were not being forced by a catalyst to really look at how things are going. And so these difficulties can be a wonderful catalyst.
Exactly.
Yes, to
And
look.
I'm going to share with you two examples of
Oh,
that.
yes, please.
So the first example, think about, let me think. The first one that I would say is
Mhm.
Blockbuster. Blockbuster were the dominant player in the VHS
In
rentals.
that category. Hmm.
In that category, right? People would go movie rentals,
Hmm.
Blockbuster. But they missed an opportunity on going into digital.
Hmm.
Netflix came with CDs, right? DVDs.
I know, in
They
the
will ship
mail.
them to your home.
Hmm.
But then instead of Blockbuster trying to gain a competitive edge, because they were the market leader, right?
Hmm.
Instead of thinking about the future,
Hmm.
hey, how do we bring digital offerings?
Hmm.
How do we think about the future? They didn't do that. They didn't check with their consumers.
Hmm.
Netflix comes in, goes with DVD rentals. They
Hmm.
will ship them to your home. You will return them, no problem.
Hmm.
But then Netflix saw something bigger, and it was video streaming. And
Yeah.
look at what they are now. They
Yeah.
are the largest.
Yeah.
So, and what happened with Blockbuster?
Hmm.
Nothing.
It's gone.
It's gone, right? So, it's important to know these things because it helps us stay relevant, open our eyes, get
Hmm.
out of our comfort zone.
Hmm.
And I would say that's an important and valuable example because if you ask anybody, if you ask a 15-year-old Gen
Hmm.
Zer,
Hmm.
right? Hey, do you know what this is? And you show them Blockbuster, they're gonna be like, "What's that? A VHS? What's that?"
Hmm.
Right? So we need to be ahead of times because things, the future is bright, but we have to be willing to
Hmm.
get out of our comfort zone,
Hmm.
right? Because if you think that you're too big to fail, that's when you're going to
Ask
fail.
Blockbuster.
And that's what happened to Blockbuster. But now I'm going to give you a very different example,
Okay.
and it's going to be in the world of retail.
Yeah.
Toys R Us.
Yeah.
When Toys R Us launched back in the 80s, huge deal because nobody had the repertoire of
Mhm.
products, the experience in store
Yes.
that Toys R Us offered. So
Yes.
when you had to buy toys,
Hmm.
Target, Walmart, no, you would go to Toys R Us. It was like where you would get everything you needed.
Hmm.
What happened? They didn't stay relevant. They didn't think of all the offerings that Amazon was providing. And then everything that they were providing, also Target was providing and Walmart.
Hmm.
So they didn't bring a more pleasant experience to their customers.
Hmm.
They didn't shift to the new needs of consumers.
Hmm.
And guess what? They went bankrupt.
Yeah.
Now, why are so many retailers going bankrupt? Right?
Yeah.
Because they're not staying ahead of times. They're not really tapping into understanding their audience, their
Hmm.
consumers. That's why I say you may be market leader today, but maybe you won't be in existence
Hmm.
10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And maybe for your listeners, oh, that's a pretty long time. Well, Woolworth was the largest retailer 50 years ago in the world,
In the
the
world.
largest retailer.
Hmm.
Memphis, right? Or Minneapolis, that's where they were originally from.
Hmm.
Nobody had done retail the way Woolworth did it, and they became a global phenomenon 50 years ago.
Hmm.
Where is Woolworth now? Australia, New Zealand, and one or two stores in Mexico.
Yeah.
Nowhere.
Yes.
So, long story short,
Hmm.
sharing with you the example and with your audience
Hmm.
of retailers that had a unique selling proposition, a unique point of difference.
Hmm.
Once upon a time,
Hmm.
like Toys R Us, like Blockbusters,
Hmm.
they lost relevance. And
Hmm.
they lost relevance because they disconnected
Hmm.
from their audience. They disconnected towards being ahead of what was coming their way. And that's why I encourage people look, consumer centricity is vital. Understanding your target audience is crucial. Investing in your business, but thinking about the future
Hmm.
is going to be more predominant than ever
Hmm.
because Just think about generative AI for a second. So
Mhm.
many people say, oh, I can develop a logo, I can develop a video, I can develop a visual
Mhm.
on generative AI. Well, anything that you do in generative AI, cannot be trademarked, cannot
Right.
be copyrighted.
Right.
That means that what the generative AI is giving you, anybody else that probes could get the same thing.
Mhm.
So, how are you going to really differentiate yourself? And
Mhm.
there's something, remember when I brought back the example from Bill Gates,
Mhm.
there's one thing that AI will never be able to do. They're not human beings. They're not us,
Mhm.
right? They are an enabler
Mhm.
if we use them right,
Mhm.
but they don't have the empathy and human connection that we
Mhm.
have,
Mhm.
and they don't have the creativity that
Mhm.
we have. So let's not lose sight of those things.
Mhm.
Staying resilient is vital, and challenging times just helps us, rise up for the occasion.
Yes, leaders have to really begin to lead again, because they're in a rocky boat, right? We're in rough seas. And the two parts you seem to be recommending is look again at who is your consumer. What are they buying? Are they buying a brand that's not yours? Is it driven by price? What is going on? Understand, reconnect with your consumer about what are they actually doing compared to what you're offering them. And then think outside of the box, outside of your comfort zone, because these times are going to require some original thinking. They
That's right.
may require some original delivery, as Netflix did for Blockbuster. It was an original delivery model. And that's what it took to reshape that category that they were in. So having a person who can not only read the research about, okay, this is what's going on with your consumer, but also say, how could it be delivered differently? How could the consumer experience be more exciting, more engaging? And when times are tough, people can sometimes just go back to brands they love. You talk about the heart. People, I mean, the president has a Diet Coke button on the desk or something. He loves Diet Coke, you
At
know.
McDonald's.
Yeah. And so there's actual love for some brands, whether it's iPhones or Nike shoes or whatever it is. There is love for brands. And if the brand you're working with has consumer love, boy, it's worth saving that and doubling down on it, delivering it in a new way. And a veteran like you, 30 years in the business, could help that refinement so that whatever marketing dollars are being invested with the next 3 to 5 years in mind as we navigate this AI and this new landscape.
Absolutely. And
Well,
it's
okay.
interesting because I have three children, and they are, my twins are Gen Alpha, so they are the newest generation, right? Born with everything, as we say. And I have one that it's on that last year of Gen Z, who's 15. And I remember last year, we went to eat something and they said, oh, mommy, we need Dr. Pepper. I'm like, Dr. Pepper? Dr. Pepper? Okay. Oh, yes, mommy, because the brand is trending on TikTok. Everybody loves it and we love it. So, of course, they made me try it. And I've been a big Coca Cola fan for many years. I wouldn't say my whole life, but for
Mhm.
many years. And I said, okay, I'll try it. And it was actually good. And I had never tried it in my lifetime until
Mhm.
my kids
Mhm.
persuaded me into it. And
Mhm.
look at Dr. Pepper, a brand that was a niche in
Mhm.
the soda
Which is
market.
how big is that market, for heaven's sakes?
It's huge.
Yeah.
But guess what? It was Coca Cola and Pepsi,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
You know what it is now, right? Coca
It's a,
Cola, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, then Pepsi.
wow.
That's how the market has changed. So
Mhm.
that's why it's important to stay relevant, because even when you thought Dr. Pepper used to be a niche brand,
Mhm.
right, in the marketplace, it became relevant, very relevant to Gen Z consumers. So
Mhm.
keep that in mind, that there are ways that people can rediscover you, that
Yes.
you can reposition yourself.
That it may be a younger consumer who hasn't been your consumer becomes one.
Exactly.
Mhm. Well, it's so exciting. So People are going to go to savvymarketers.com and they'll connect with you and you'll give them a candid conversation so they stay in the game as resilient and they keep their overhead paid and their people employed, and we'll come out the other side of this turbulent plane ride together.
Absolutely. And we're going to come out of it stronger
Mhm.
together.
It's so fun. We looked back at, Y2K and some of these other challenges, and we think about how our resilience has actually made us stronger, more prepared. And just wondering, what would it be like in 5 years? Where people are doing actual human creative work and not working on an assembly line because there's a robot doing that. Let the robot move the cardboard boxes. We want humans doing really human-centric work with human hearts and human minds. So yeah, it'll be so exciting to see. We'll catch up in 5 years and we'll document the changes. Okay,
Absolutely.
Alex, thank you
Okay,
so much.
that's why it's so important not to lose sight of things. That's what I tell people, because in moments like this we can get distracted, and when we get distracted,
Mhm,
we lose focus, and when we lose focus,
mhm,
that's when bad things happen, right?
mhm,
And I
mhm,
think that it's very important for your listeners and for those that are viewing the podcast to know, hey, yes, there's a little bit of turbulence, but don't worry, we're
mhm,
going to land safely. Just let's stay the course, but we need to understand
mhm,
where we are, where we want to be, and
mhm.
we have to think and envision that future. Because if you don't do that exercise, and that's a strategic exercise,
Yes.
that's why strategy is so important. If you don't do that exercise, you're not going to be really thinking about
Mhm,
what it's going to
mhm,
be potential threats for your business in
mhm,
the future.
mhm. Well, very exciting. Thank you for sharing all this wisdom. Very excited about the future. And it's really nice to hear that in times of great change, that's okay because we'll come out stronger. It'll be more exciting in the future. Thanks so much, Alex. We'll see everybody the next time.
Thank you so much for having me.